Welcome to 40 Fit Radio, where we bring you science-based, common sense information regarding fitness, health, and lifestyle for the 40-plus community. I'm your host, Darin Doctor of Physical Therapy with 28 years clinical practice experience, starting strength coach, and certified CrossFit trainer. "40 Fit Radio, real people, real fitness, real health."
Welcome back to 40 Fit Radio. This is Trent Jones, and I'm here with Coach Double D. And today we're going to talk about barbell training for strength. So in the last podcast, we discussed the 10 general physical skills and the fact that there's one of those skills that underpin all the rest. It forms the basis for all of the other physical skills, and that is strength. Strength, as it so happens, is the hardest to build, and it's also the most long-lasting of the adaptations of the physical skills. So it's very important, it's of utmost importance that we understand how to train for strength. And if we agree that strength is of utmost importance, how exactly do we gain it? How do we get stronger? So I'm going to hand it off to Darin here to talk about how we do that.
Thanks, Trent. And so I think, a lot of different coaches, people, experts, whatever, have different opinions upon the value of strength. I think we can all agree upon, based on our last podcast, that it's the foundation of all human movement. They're out of the 10 general physical skills. And so as a master's, how do you go about gaining legitimate strength? And I'm not talking about strength that a power lifter might have. I mean, if that's your chosen sport, then great. But I'm more talking about just functional, daily, everyday life strength that you could use for daily living, and then also maybe a chosen recreation or a chosen sport. So that's what we're going to cover in this podcast, and we're gonna try to dissect it a little bit. We're not going to get so deep as to you could listen to this podcast and you could then do your whole programming as a master's through this podcast, but it will give you the infrastructure or the basically the framework that you can use to then go within your community, work with a coach, and be able to put together a strength program that's an effective strength program. So when we talk about effective strength programs, I think it's important for us to look at what should we use for an exercise criteria to select the exercises or the movements, whether it be the type of exercise, the mode, the frequency, the volume, all those things we'll talk a little bit later in this podcast, Trent. But what selection criteria should we use? And so I know you, Trent, love the book Barbell Prescription by Dr. Jonathan Sullivan, MD, and Andy Baker, right?
Excellent book.
Yeah.
Excellent book.
I think we both, even though Trent's not a master's yet, he still loves the book. And I think you'll find that anyone that's a coach that is coaching masters in the physical fitness or health industry should be reading that book and learning from it. It's a great book to add into your library, as a lot of other books are. But Dr. Sullivan has basically put together a criteria for exercise selection when it comes to the prescription. And when you think about prescription, it's called Barbell Prescription. So obviously it's a prescription, just like a doctor would write a prescription for medication or some other form of treatment, some other ancillary treatment. This is a prescription for barbell training, or a prescription for how to get fit in a safe manner, basically. Okay, so we're going to go through that real quickly. And the first is that our exercise medicine, as Sully puts it, must be safe. It's got to be something that's safe. And we know that the way that we like to train with barbells, it's safe. And so that's the first thing. It's got to be safe. The second thing is the exercise medicine must have a wide therapeutic range. And basically what that means is, could that exercise activity be done by someone at a very low level, low weight, low intensity, even maybe low frequency, but at a very low level, and then range all the way to much higher levels of performance based on their individual need. Okay. So that would be the second criteria. The third criteria would be that our exercise needs to be comprehensive, that it needs to be complete, something that is the most efficient basically and can provide the most complete, let's say, stress or stimulus to be able to create the change that we need. And the change that we're talking about here is strength. Now, obviously, strength training does affect a lot of the other 10 general physical skills. It's obvious. They're a conjugate. They all work together. And we're actually recording this podcast episode today in one of my clinics, one of my physical therapy clinics, because we thought it would be quieter. You can only record so many at your home or somewhere else. So, but I'm looking at a wall that's in one of my clinics, and basically across the wall line, I have listed the 10 general physical skills. And the reason why I have it listed there is because I want my patients to know how important those 10 general physical skills are in regards to human movement and human health. And so the fourth criteria is that it must specifically and effectively combat the sick and aging phenotype. And we're going to let Dr. Sully or Dr. Sullivan talk more about that when he comes onto the podcast, and we interviewed him later as a content expert on his book and talk to him a little bit about the principles in his book. But the sick and aging phenotype is basically what we see most throughout Western society. It probably represents the majority of masters. Wouldn't you agree with that?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I mean, if you look at the health statistics, it definitely does. And so you need your exercise program and prescription to best attack that sick and aging phenotype. And then the fifth one is that it needs to be efficient and simple as possible. And I love barbell training for that effect, and that reason is it's fairly efficient. And it's very, very simple in regards to how to put together a program. So then that leads us to, if we're talking about developing strength and we follow that criteria, what would be the best method to do that? And in my opinion, and I think in the opinion of a lot of other coaches, the barbell is a very useful tool to do that. Yeah. But there are many, many ways that we can use the barbell, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And we like the barbell in particular because it allows for, it's a very flexible tool. It, like you said, allows you to do a wide range of exercises, a wide range of different types of ranges of motion. And it also allows us to load the body as a full body, right? Instead of just, if you think about, you compare a barbell to a machine, which is designed to take a body part or just one segment of the body through a specific range of motion. The barbell is constructed such that we can use it bilaterally, using both limbs and using the entire body. And as a result, it's very effective for general strength.
Yeah, I think, compound movement, people always talk about functional exercises. Functional, I mean, we have the word functional in everything today. It's a great buzzword. But when you think about barbell movements, and we're specifically going to talk about the press, the squat, the deadlift, the bench press, and then for power recruitment, we would talk about the power clean as a barbell movement or exercise that could be used. But when you do all of those movements, you're using compound movements. So it's not unilateral movement. It's not isolated training. You know, in the world of coaching, we talk about isolated exercises like bicep curls and things like that, and tricep kickbacks or pull downs or things like that. It's compound movement, and it's also very functional. It is function. Think about it.
Yeah, if we think about just going through everyday life, right? The hip hinge is kind of the basis of most human movement, right? We sit down with the hip hinge, we walk around with a little bit of a hip hinge. Whenever we pick stuff up off the ground, we put it up on a shelf. You know, just basic human movement, getting around life. Is compound movement, right? We use our whole bodies, and we rarely use our bodies in isolation if we're just doing activities, right? So it makes sense then to use a barbell to train our bodies in the same way that we move in everyday life, or similar way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that when you think about using the barbell for training, we'll talk a little bit about this in a few minutes, but I know that to a lot of people that's scary. So we'll address that here in just a second. But once so let's say most people who know me as a coach know that I'm a strength-based coach. I love strength training because of what it does to human movement, human capacity, human health and fitness, above all other things. So when we talk about barbell training, then we have to decide how we're going to barbell train and who we're going to get to teach us to do that. That's where the rubber meets the road, or that's where the rub is. That's the challenge, is that not everyone in the health and fitness industry, or definitely in the health industry, but in the fitness industry, understands how to coach barbell movements. Now, there's a difference between barking out orders and telling people squat or telling people deadlift or press the bar overhead. That is not coaching. That is basically just telling them to perform the movement. Coaching to me, and I'll expand a little bit on this in a few minutes, is more about using a specific model or a method that's a proven method that can reliably produce the human movement that we want in the exercise we're teaching or coaching. Okay? So in that vein, then I recommend definitely that you find a coach. If you're a master's athlete out there and you're wanting to do barbell training to develop strength, you need to find a coach. That's the hard part. Where can you get a coach? Well, I'll put a disclaimer out there right now on the podcast. Trent's smiling largely. And that is that I am a starting strength coach. I'm a certified starting strength coach. I am also a certified CrossFit trainer. I'm also a USAW sports performance coach. And I'm a physical therapist, a doctor of physical therapy. I've had several other continuing education seminars and read. I have a fairly large library of books and resources that are in the coaching vein or are in the barbell training vein or the fitness vein. And so I think I have a fairly wide breadth of knowledge, but I'm always adding to that and learning new things because I think that makes a good coach, a well-rounded coach. So I use the starting strength model, the starting strength barbell method, as my method to coach masters through the barbell movements. In the past, I used what I learned mostly from books that I read, and then when I became a CrossFit coach almost 9 years ago, I guess it's been 9 years ago, almost 10 years ago, really, a little over 9 years ago, I used that method for a while. And so I think it's a constant evolution of what I know to be the best thing biomechanically and the best thing for efficiency and for safety and for producing the kind of strength that we want to produce. So if you are out there and you are a master's athlete and you want to barbell train, that's going to be the first step, finding a coach. Now, you could do that through your local starting strength coach. You could look up online and go to startingstrength.org, and you could find a coach there. There's a map that you can search. Or you could also, if you don't have a local coach in your area, you could go through Starting Strength Online Coaching. And as a disclaimer, I will say that I'm a staff member on SSOC. And so you could go through Starting Strength Online Coaching, and they will assign you a coach that best meets your needs. And that I believe is startingstrengthonlinecoaching.com.
Correct.
Right?
Yep.
And so you can go to that. Now, let's say you decide not to choose either one of those methods of receiving coaching, either in-person coaching by a starting strength coach for barbell training or online coaching. Then you could also go to your local CrossFit gym. You could also go to your local gym. My recommendation there is that if you're hiring a coach that is a barbell coach and he or she is supposed to know how to coach, first of all, ask them what model they use. Do they have a specific model of coaching? And ask them to give you an example of how they would coach a squat, maybe. If they tell you, well, I'm going to tell you to put the bar on your back and you're going to squat down and you're going to stand up, then they're probably not your choice. They should have a specific model, a methodology, a teaching model that they use, and then they build cues off of that to then cue the proper body movements or responses that they want off of the teaching model that they've taught you. Does that make sense? And so then from there, I would ask them, do they coach masters? Specifically, have they coached masters? If they haven't, then they have very little experience as to how to coach you in regards to programming and how to tweak that program to ensure that as being an older individual that you're getting the most out of your barbell training. And so you could use resources other than a starting strength resource, but I find the starting strength coaches to be probably the most proficient, the best at teaching a specific model that's effective for 99.9% of the people that we coach.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, we move on to then basically that barbell training is for everyone, guys. Any of you out there that are masters, no matter what your ailments are, no matter what your problems are, 99.9% of the people out there I can coach. We can coach through using barbell training. I know it's scary. I know that some people associate it with things like power lifters or bodybuilders. And you know, one of the things women talk about is I don't want to get bulky, right?
Right. Yeah. Don't want to get bulky. Don't want to, don't want my arms to get too big.
Yeah.
Don't want to, yeah.
Yeah. So what do you think about the idea of women getting bulky barbell training, Trent? You think it's possible or?
Well, first of all, I'd say that I want to see some strong ladies out there. That's attractive to me.
Yeah.
Strength is attractive.
Absolutely.
But yeah, from practical experience, you know, the women that I know in the lifting community, no, they're not bulky. They're not bulky. In fact, at the nationals meet, the U.S. Strength Lifting Nationals, which I attended in January, you know, it was half men, half women. So we had, I think, roughly 80 lifters there, 40 women. And I mean, you pretty much got, just like in the general population, all types,
just
all
about
body
every
shapes,
type out there.
short, tall, wide,
Yeah.
thin, you know, all types of frames. So it's for everybody. And strength is not the same thing as muscle mass and bulk and frame size and all that kind of thing.
Right. Training for strength in and of itself as our primary outcome is different than training for muscle hypertrophy, which would be for just size and mass. And that makes you strong too, but that's not our goal here. Our goal is to get reasonably strong for function, life, recreation, and sport. And so, you know, it's for anybody. And if you have a background in powerlifting or a background in bodybuilding or that kind of fitness model, then the way that we train barbell training with individuals is very different from that model. The way that we select exercises and the set and rep scheme, and we're going to talk a little bit about that in a few minutes. But I know that most older athletes, I think as we get older, and I'll speak from experience, if I didn't have the knowledge base that I did, I might look at it a little, I might shy away from it too a little bit, you know, and might be scared of it a little bit. But a lot of the older athletes, a lot of the older masters shy away from barbell training because they think it's not safe or they think it's not practical to their everyday life, and it's foreign and it's scary. But the real truth to the matter is this, it's very safe. Barbell training is safer than most of the other lifting sports, like weightlifting, like Olympic weightlifting. It's safer than any contact sport. If you're out running today, if you're a runner, you're in a higher risk sport than barbell training. And so there are fewer injuries from barbell training than there are any of the contact sports or any of the, you know, tennis, running, any of the gymnastics, any of those other sports that many adults, even into their older years, like to enjoy. So historically, barbell training, traditional classical barbell training, the way that we like to do it, Trent, is really been designed for the general non-athletic population. And so that's what we're going to use. And then that leads us to the specific method. We talked a little bit about the barbell movements that we're going to teach, which would be the squat again, the press, the deadlift, the bench press, and then the power clean for power recruitment if we have a need there. Now, we would also then add some assistive exercises. So we might use the chin up, the push up. We might use a leg press machine. We'll talk a little bit more about that. That we might have someone who can't squat necessarily with a barbell yet use a leg press until we get enough strength base foundation to where they could move into the squatting rack and be able to squat in a power rack for a barbell squat. We also would use, did I say the lat pull down?
Lat pull downs,
we'd use
another excellent.
Lat pull down to develop chin up or pull up strength.
Right.
And then we also might use other exercises like barbell rows, Romanian deadlifts, those types of things to incorporate in a program. Quite a bit farther down the road, though. Those first 5 exercises, and usually also excluding the power clean, the first 4 exercises are the big 4 that we start with all masters.
All right, so we've got squats, we've got deadlifts, presses. What does it look like if you've got a new master's athlete is coming in your gym day 1? What do you do with them? How are you going to get them started? What does that first day look like in the gym?
Well, the first thing, I do a lot of one-on-ones right now. I coach a lot of masters who will contact me and say, I just want to learn the barbell movements. I had a gentleman that came a little less than 2 weeks ago, 53-year-old male, never lifted barbells in his life. Is an IT executive at a company, and he came in and said, I want to learn how to barbell train. So the first thing I told him was, when we meet in our appointment, here's what you need to do. If you have some lifters, some shoes, some flat lifter shoes, you need to bring those with you.
And that could be on
the
cheap end. Yeah, Chucks.
Could be Converse, a flat court shoe.
Yeah, I like the Adidas Sambas. That's a nice inexpensive
soccer shoes.
shoe.
That works good. What I don't want to see them in is a pair of running shoes necessarily, because they don't have a lot of lateral stability. I want to see them in a really good flat tennis shoes so that we can get a really good flat base of support in their stance. And so if they already have lifters, which lifters have in some ways been associated more with the Olympic weightlifting community, but most barbell athletes today use weightlifting shoes.
Yeah, and so when you say weightlifting shoe, just to be clear there, we're talking about a shoe with a solid sole. So
Correct.
it's completely flat against the ground.
Very inflexible.
Very inflexible, with a metatarsal strap, which straps across your foot to kind of suck your foot in so there's no movement within the shoe. And then finally, a raised heel.
Correct.
Yeah, so
a rigid raised heel. And what it does is it opens the ankle joint into a little bit more of a plantar flexion angle so that you basically get a little bit more opportunity for range of motion, a broader range of motion to start with in the squat and the deadlift and some of these other movements. And
so for those of you who are going to go through this kind of day 1 barbell training that we're gonna talk about, when you're squatting, if you're having trouble reaching depth and you don't have a pair of weightlifting shoes, we highly recommend them because they can make all the difference.
Sure.
Okay, so we've got our lifters, we've got our Chucks.
Right. Well, the next thing is I'd like to see them bring a belt. If they have a belt, we'll have them bring their belt. Comfortable clothing, so a pair of shorts, warm-ups, whatever, T-shirt, whatever, and then they're going to come to the session. In the session that I have with them, we're going to be using the following pieces of equipment. We're going to be using plates, metal plates, or what are called bumper plates. Okay, we're probably going to need some collars, a couple of collars to put on the end of the barbell. We're going to use a barbell. Now, if they are a much weaker lifter, a much weaker masters, in my facility, I actually have different weighted barbells that we could use because some lifters just can't start with a heavier barbell to start with.
Yeah. In
some facilities, they just have one weight, and that's a 45-pound men's barbell, or 20 kilos, I think.
Yeah.
And so, so you need a barbell, you need a power rack or a squat rack. Okay. I prefer a rack, an enclosed rack, if we could have one. Safety bars need to be used. The barbell, the plates, the bumper plates, the collars, the shoes, the belt, comfortable clothing, and you are good to go. We are off to the races and we are lifting.
Okay, great. Yeah. So we've got all the equipment now. We're all kitted out, and what do we do?
All right, so we just look good.
That's what I do.
We stand around looking in the gym as if we know what to do. From that point, I love the Novice Linear Progression, or the NLP program, designed by Starting Strength for strength training. And I'll just say this right here. I said it a little earlier in the podcast, but this might seem like a commercial for Starting Strength, and it's not, but it kind of is in some ways. When it comes to strength training, I have found that the starting strength method to start with, and for a long period thereafter, is the most efficient, safest, well thought out model for teaching strength and for developing strength in masters levels athletes and in all athletes alike. I mean, that's pretty much universal, no matter what the age and no matter what the chosen sport. If you're just basically trying to build a foundation of strength, the starting strength method is very effective. Now, as a coach too, like I talked about earlier, I also have lots of other thought processes on other aspects of fitness and health that come from many other models. Like in the nutrition world, I have a couple of guys and several ladies that I follow in the nutrition world, in the mobility world or flexibility world, some coaches that I follow there, in the kettlebell world, in the conditioning world, the running world. And so I think the goal of any good coach is that we take all of these different models of fitness, these different modalities, and we combine them together in an effective, results-driven, outcome-driven program that meets the need of our client base, if that makes sense. And so that's why I like the novice linear progression, the NLP starting strength model for a master's lifter or a master's person. I think it's effective. And what we're going to do with that program is we're going to take advantage of what we call the Novice Effect. Now, I know you know what the Novice Effect is because I've coached you. So, Trent, tell us a little bit about the Novice Effect.
So the Novice Effect is the initial stage of our training where we can maximize the adaptation we're training for, where we can maximize strength.
Now, wait a second. You're saying novice. Well, masters aren't young anymore. So would that still apply to them?
Absolutely. Everyone has a certain genetic potential, a genetic ceiling for strength, and your ability to take advantage of that is greatest when you first begin.
Right.
And as we advance through our training, as we get stronger, it becomes harder and harder to add additional strength because we're getting closer to that genetic ceiling that's up there. So in order to take advantage of this novice effect, we use this novice linear progression, which is simply starting at a weight that's challenging on day one and adding weight to that every workout thereafter.
Great.
That's the key, adding a little bit of weight every single time we get under the bar.
Yeah, and I can't tell you how many times I've walked into a gym and you see people doing the exact same thing they did 3 weeks ago. They're doing the same weights. And if you're out there listening and you're a master's and you've been going to the gym for a year and you've got the same routine that you did a year ago, or let's say you've got the same routine that you did a month ago and you're doing the same thing, there's not enough stress to drive adaptation there. There's got to be enough stress in your program to drive adaptation. And adaptation in this podcast is strength. That's what we're trying to drive, is your strength. And the only way we can drive your strength is through a principle called the overload principle. And that means that eventually we have to get heavier and heavier and heavier. Now, the beauty behind this, and I'll give you a perfect practical example. I train with my best friend. He'll be 52 this year. I'm a year younger than him and much better looking. No, just joking. But I'm a year younger than him, and we train together. And he is stronger today than he's ever been in his entire life. And he spent the last year doing mostly nothing but barbell training, some conditioning, a little bit of conditioning on the side, but mostly barbell training. I'm going to interview him in a later podcast just to share his story. He's got a great story because he had a very bad injury and we rehabbed him and then we put him under the bar and we gradually progressed him. But he's gained in a year over 20 pounds in a year. He's lifting PRs for 3 sets of 5 that he could never lift before for a set of 1 for a 1 rep max. And a lot of people would say, well, that's a lot of weight. He's lifting a lot of heavy weight. Is that safe? Well, you got to think about it. He's done that gradually over time through that linear progression. We've just added a little bit more weight. And so his body has adapted to the stress. The muscular system, the musculoskeletal system has adapted to the stress. Not only do the muscles get stronger, but the connective tissue, which can be a problem as we age, the tie-ins of the muscle into the bone, the purchase points between the tendon and the muscle, and then tendon attaches into the bone, that purchase point gets stronger. They get thicker. They get more resilient to forces and loads, and that also prevents injury. Also, your ligaments actually get stronger and thicker when we use the joint and put greater loads on it. So basically, our goal is to use that novice effect like Trent was talking about, even with the older masters, because they're novices when it comes to barbell training. So even if you've been in a fitness program for 5 years, when you come in to my gym, and I think to most starting strength coaches or to most really good coaches, they're going to start you on what would be considered the NLP because it works.
So let me interject there. So in the case of your friend, right, he was no stranger to physical activity and lifting weights prior to this, but he had simply never done a linear progression.
Correct. Yeah. He had actually been training in one of my CrossFit gyms for years, and we had done barbell training over the years, but we had never withdrawn most of the conditioning exercises like we had in this particular setting. And that was the key for him. That was the key for him really getting as strong as he wanted to get. We can always add the conditioning back in, but it's really hard to develop that strength. And we know that the strength is the foundation for the fitness that we're trying to build as a 40 Fit Masters.
Right. So even if you've squatted and deadlifted before, if you've never done it with this linear progression where you're adding weight every single time, you've got linear progression on the table. It's there for you to take.
Absolutely.
You still are a novice, and you can ride that train. And let's be real. I mean, we never get to get stronger this fast in our life. We've only got one novice phase, and once that's over, it's over, and we've got to move on to the next phase.
And I tell you, it's an exciting thing to watch a master's aged individual. And remember, guys, masters is really anything over the age of 30 anymore, but let's just say, 40 and above, 35 and above, 40 and above. But it's a great experience as a coach to watch someone. I have another client, I think she turns 55 this year or 54. And, she spoke the other day at a little gathering that we had, and she said, it's amazing. I've been lifting now for the last 8 weeks. I'm stronger than I've ever been. And for an older individual to say that, it's very refreshing. It is the fountain of youth because it's an experience of youth that you haven't had for years. And it's something that is associated with youth too. Being strong is associated with the younger crowd. Not anymore. Not with us around, at least. And so that's the goal. That's our goal is to put you into this barbell program. Now let's kind of dial this down a little bit, because there are some things that we're going to manipulate in this program as a coach that are going to help you get to your goal for getting stronger. We're going to control specific training variables, and those variables are going to be frequency. That means how often you're going to train. Volume, how much total, and I like to look at volume as not just in that specific work session or workout, but also total tonnage, total weight over the week. How much weight did you lift in total tonnage over the week? Intensity would be also based on how much weight you lifted, okay, in an individual workout. How much load are we going to put on you? And then what type of exercise would be mode? And we're going to barbell train. That's the mode that we're going to use. And we're going to add those other assistive exercises as needed in there based on client goals. And so the specific program, let me give you an example. Let's use an example, Trent, of a 55-year-old male or female. They're untrained. So they walk into the gym and they say, I want to get stronger. So what we're going to do is we're going to make sure we have the adequate equipment needed, right?
Yep.
And we talked about the things that you need to look for as a master's within the gym in your community. The second thing is we're basically going to teach you through the coaching model the squat first, the press second, the deadlift third, and then the bench press last. There are some masters based on shoulder health and some other issues, could be their elbows too, that I would not necessarily teach the bench press. It's not the most important of those two upper body exercises in my mind, and I think the mind of a lot of strength coaches. The press is a much more functional movement, as it uses the entire kinetic chain from the feet, because you're in a standing position in the press. So let's quantify that a little bit for our listeners on the podcast. The squat is basically the barbell on your back. You squat all the way down into the hip crease of your hip, goes below the top of your kneecap, and then you stand back up with the load on your back, the barbell on your back. If we're using the leg press, then we're going to use similar criteria for the depth and how you're going to move within the leg press. The press, we're basically going to start with the bar in front of our chest at our collarbone height, our elbows underneath and in front of the bar slightly, our wrists slightly extended about 20 degrees. And we're not going to go into the specific coaching model here, but we're going to press the bar back over our head till our arms are fully it's actually fully flexed over our head at the shoulder with elbow extension. And then we're going to bring the bar right back down in the same path to in front of the chest again. So that's the press. It's a standing movement.
Sometimes called the standing overhead press or the two hands press. But
military press.
We just call it the press.
That's right. And then we've got the deadlift. And the deadlift's basically a hip hinge. It's like picking something up off the floor. But we use a barbell. And so you're going to bend over with the back straight, okay, with the hips relatively high and the shank or the shin relatively straight, slightly forward. You're going to grip the bar and your arms are going to be outside your shins, not inside. Some people do sumo and other things. We don't teach that. We teach a traditional classical deadlift, and you're going to stand up with the bar on your shins, dragging up your shins and your thighs, and then lower the bar back down to where it starts directly over the midfoot. So those are the movements that we're going to teach most masters. We also might teach the bench press, like we talked about, as long as there's not any major shoulder health issues. And the bench press has a particular method and model too to be performed when we teach it. But those are the barbell movements we're going to teach you. So we've got our client now, and we've gone through all the different movements. Along with going through the movements, we've also established their load. So how do we do that, Trent? Establish load.
So when our client, when she gets up under the bar, we're going to first, before we even get to under the bar, we're going to learn the body weight movement, right? So without any load, just the body weight.
Correct.
Then once we've learned the movement, we get under the bar, the empty bar, and we start squatting 1 set of 5 with the empty bar. And from there, we'll add a little bit of weight, maybe 5, maybe 10 pounds at a time, and do sets of 5 until the load is challenging. And we define challenging as the bar speed as it goes down and back up. The coach observes the bar speed. And when that bar speed starts to noticeably slow, we know, okay, let's stop there. That's a challenging load for today. That's going to be what we call our work weight.
Right. And I will say for my clients, I will generally yield, especially a master's client, I'll yield towards it being a little lighter than heavier because I want a lot of blue sky. I want a lot of opportunity for them to grow over time and get stronger over time. If we start them too heavy, then we're going to hit that wall too fast. We're going to hit that maximum genetic potential in that first cycle of the NLP. And we have several cycles potentially of loading up over time, raising the weight every single workout, dropping it down in load by a percentage and then raising it up again and continuing to climb almost like a stair-stepping effect over time. And so I will generally yield towards having a little bit lighter weight than heavier. But the goal is, if you put it on an exertion level, which I hate to do with a novice trainee, but with someone like you who understands barbells, Trent, and someone like me, I mean, I would say to me that would be a 5 or 6, on a scale of 0 to 10, with 10 being the heaviest thing I've ever lifted, 0 being no weight at all, nothing, just body weight. I would say that this is going to be somewhere about 50 to 60% of what my client could do.
Yeah, it's slightly challenging.
So let's say through your program, you worked with your coach and you just weren't strong enough to do the 45-pound bar. And I expressed earlier that in our gym, we have varying weights of bars so that individuals that are weaker to start with can start with a lighter bar, and then we can add weight to that progressively as we do our warm-up and then get into our working sets, which is a static load across for the set and rep scheme for the chosen barbell movement. Well, then you could also do a leg press. If you weren't strong enough to do the barbell, you could do a leg press. In programming too, along with the barbell movements, we're also going to be adding in some body weight movements that we think are effective. I like push-ups. I think push-ups done correctly are a great basic body weight movement to use in a fitness program. Chin-ups. I do like the chin-up better than I like the pull-up. I have a long-winded reason for that, but basically it recruits more muscle mass, it gets you stronger faster, and it also produces a better stretch on some of the musculature that we need to be developing, and it gets them to work in a broader range of motion than the pull-up does. So I like the chin-up too, so we teach the chin-ups, and we might have to do chin-ups through, using, if you have it available, you might have to use a chin-up assistance machine or a pull-up assistance machine. You've seen those probably that have a very progressive loading.
Right. Yeah, you can select the poundage on the stack that you want to use to help you get up. So if you can't do an unassisted body weight chin-up, then you can help take some of the load off your body so you can still get the chin-up movement in without having to move your whole body.
Right, yep. And I'll also use pull-up bars within, like in the CrossFit gyms, there's pull-up bars everywhere. So we use the pull-up bar, the chin-up bar, and we might band them also, put a band underneath their feet. They might use a band for assisting on some of the resistance if they can't do their body weight yet. But our goal is that we get a full range of motion with the proper technique and form of the movement that we want, and not have it be a herky-jerky movement. We want it to be a strict movement to start with. We might also use other machine exercises like a lat pull down that we mentioned earlier. We might use some also other assistive or accessory exercises like Romanian deadlifts, good mornings. These are other exercises that we can employ in a program much farther down the road, generally speaking. And then, like we talked about, we can teach the power clean to masters who want to have, they want to develop power. And power is basically using their speed. Not their speed. Power is basically using their strength in an explosive form or explosive manner. And so the Olympic lifts, specifically the power clean, is what we use. It allows them to recruit that hip extension and that thrust quickly, and that's a great exercise to work on dynamic effort. We're going to use these specific variables like we talked about. We're then going to teach the model of the movement with just the bar, with body weight first in many of the movements, and then the bar. And like Trent said, we're going to gradually start adding weight until we get to their working set load for each of these barbell movements. And that's what a good coach should do. And so at that point in that session, now we have a trainee that has done all four, if we've taught all four, of the basic barbell strength movements. We've also established that there's a specific model or method that's supposed to be done, and they have that information. We've also used cues with them throughout the coaching model, so they have that information. So we can give them feedback, whether it be as an online client or whether it be as an in-person client, we can give them feedback. And then lastly, we've established the load that they're going to start with in their first session on their own, or with us if they're coming to the gym and training with us.
Yeah. And so that's an important point, right? Because the load and the work weights that we did, right? So when we say work weights, we're saying for all of the exercises except the deadlift. So for the squats and the presses, we've done 3 sets of 5 reps at our working weight, right? That's what we call our workload. And once we've got that on paper, we've got some data.
So what Trent's referring to is the novice linear progression starting strength program model, which basically says that on the squat and the press and the bench press, we're going to do 3 sets of 5 across. We're going to have the same weight. It's not a progressive load during the work sets. The warm-up loads are progressive, where we do warm-up loads, and then we get into our work sets. Once we get into our work sets, it should be a static load across. That's the model that we teach, and we think is the most effective. It's the safest for a master's athlete, too. And so for the deadlift, though, we're going to do 1 set of 5. Then we have a programming model that we employ, that we use, that's a template that's for most masters, it's 3 days a week. For some masters that are older, even older, we might only do 2 days a week of training for some trainees. And that's the job of that individual coach to size up that master's lifter and figure out what's going to be most effective for them. And so at that point, we're ready to get started, man. I mean, we've got the basics of a good barbell foundation program that any of our trainees, any of my clients can walk out of here and go train on their own in a gym with weekly feedback from me, or they can do it online. I mean, we have literally thousands now online clients.
Sure. Yeah.
Or they can do it through working one-on-one with the coach or in a small group class setting.
Yeah, and let's one thing we did mention at the beginning is on the startingstrength.com forums. So we've got there's starting strength coaches out there you can see in person, right? We've got SSOC for the online coaching, but if you don't have the money for that right now and you want to just give it a shot training on your own, go to the startingstrength.com forums and upload some videos of yourself performing these movements for your set of 5. And there's starting strength coaches that for free give form checks. They'll give you feedback on your form and give you some corrections to make sure you're doing the movement correctly. So there's lots of resources out there that don't necessarily have to cost anything to get started.
Yeah, I think the key thing is spend your dollars where your dollars are really effective. The best return on your investment is to hire a coach, at least at the start. So if you're not going to get online coaching, or you don't have a physical coach, a starting strength coach in your community, or you're not going to travel to a coach, then go to a local CrossFit gym too. I mean, there is some methodology there. And so, and there's some good methodology there in some of the things that are being taught. And so my recommendation would be go to a local CrossFit gym. I know they have all the equipment needed. Find out if there's a coach on staff that's a barbell coach and then has read starting strength or uses starting strength with some of their strength programming. And you could start there and probably have pretty good success with that too. And so the goal is we want to get you in the hands of a proficient coach, someone that uses a model and a method, and that's what you're looking for.
All right, so you've got your 3 sets of 5 that you've done written down in your journal, which you're going to keep a journal, and you're going to write down every work set that you do, and you're going to write down the weight. It's up to you. Go to the next workout, add 5 pounds to each of these lifts, continue to increase the weight, and you'll find yourself in a very short period of time looking back and saying, wow, these numbers got a lot bigger.
Yeah, and I think the key there is it sounds so simplistic and not so sexy, but the sexy part about it is that you get strong, you get crazy strong. And I think people want to, a lot of coaches, specifically within the fitness world, they want to come up with some gadget or some gimmick, some trend. Hey, you need to do this or you need to do that. Here's a good example. You know, we're getting older, guys. Let's face it, we're getting older. I'm over 50. My goal now is everything I do in life, within reason, I mean, except for just going and listening to a good band or something, but everything I do in life is about return on investment, whether it be my time, my money, my income, my emotional resources, my intellectual resources, whatever it is, I want a good return on investment. And when you're looking at training in the way that we are talking about training, you're getting your best return on investment. And isn't that what this is about? But here's a caveat here, guys. Listen to this, because this is a pearl. And if you don't hear anything else on this podcast, this is one thing you need to hear today, and that is, don't look for the complicated program. Don't look for the sexy program. Don't look for the thing that seems like, man, it's the newest fandango thing. Because here's the deal. If you don't have a basic savings account, why are you out doing options and margins and risky investments? We wouldn't do that with our finances.
Yeah.
Why would we do that with our fitness and health? Start with a basic foundation. And this is a basic foundation, but you can carry this model way into your development as a stronger person at an older age. So, what's our overall goal for our clients? Obviously, this podcast was put together to teach you about how to get stronger using barbell training. That's our goal. We want you to get reasonably strong for life or sport or any other recreational or functional activity that you have or any endeavor. We want you to be healthy. Building your muscle mass is going to make you healthier, and it's going to basically provide a basic foundation for you to build the other 10 general physical skills. We want you to become more able and useful in general, and that's key. And then lastly, but not least, I love Mark Ripeto's basic quote: we want to make you harder to kill. So this has been a great podcast. And do you have anything else you want to add, Trent?
Well, if you want to see more about this podcast, if you want to view the show notes, make sure you go to 40fit.com. That's 40fit.com. There'll be lots of new content coming up. New podcasts will be posted weekly. So make sure you subscribe on iTunes, on Stitcher, on Overcast, whatever your podcast outlet of choice is. Subscribe, leave us a review, tell us what you think, and get in touch. And check out 40fit.com for all of the new content and events that will be coming up soon. Thanks so much.